Hey guys, welcome to week 16. Championship week has come and gone, and as commish, I'd like to welcome Brandon's blown call to the list of league members who have won a championship. Of course, I'd like to, but I haven't actually won anything myself yet, so enjoy your stupid trophy, jerk. Brandon's blown call defeats Pope 1.0's Hey Buddy 172.8 to 88.8. Brandon's team was peaking at the right time, putting up 172 points this week after scoring 158 last week. Very dominant playoff performance. You were led to the win by wide receiver power duo of Stephon Diggs with 40 points and Mike Evans with 38.1 points. Patrick Mahomes added 19.2, and everyone else on your squad scored at least 11 points, with the lone exception of Chase Edmonds' 1.8 points. Continuing the curse, Pope 1.0 falls short and now joins the 8 other number 1 seeds who have been unable to win a championship. You got 26.7 points from Deshaun Watson and 11.8 from Aaron Jones, in a game in which he barely played due to a hip injury. A pretty quiet week from the guys who got you here, as Jones sat for most of the game in favor of A.J. Dillon, and Green Bay's defense bottled up Derrick Henry, which is a crazy thing to think about, and only allowed him 9.8 points. And James Robinson didn't even play due to injury. Those are your 3 best running backs, and you got less than 20 points out of all 3 of them combined. It's a rough week. Yahoo has a nice feature. If you wanted to go back and look at what your team did over the course of the season, whether you started somebody or not just whether they were owned by you, you can go back and check that information. Looking at Brandon's team log, if you want to select a team MVP, it's tough to look past the impact that Stephon Diggs has had for you this season. His $33 draft cost brought you the number 3 scoring wide receiver to this point. Of course, having Diggs at number 3, Calvin Ridley at number 5, and Mike Evans at number 7 helps a little bit as well. Snagging Darren Waller for $15 couldn't hurt either. This team basically ran on the strength of your draft. You had no major acquisitions from the free agency pool. You got 11 or more starts from every player that you slotted into a starting spot after the draft, with the exception of the kicker spot, which you did have to rotate quite a bit. In the third place game, Pope 2.0's Pew Pews defeats Drew's FMeCMC 94.7 to 82.9. Pope 2.0 got 22.1 from CeeDee Lamb and 19.3 from Travis Kelce, and 16.7 from Justin Herbert. I think you're probably pretty happy with that finish, looking at how your team ended at the running back position. I remember trying to trade from a running back from you earlier in the season for Keenan Allen, and the best that I was able to come away with was Darrell Henderson. Unfortunately for you, Joe Mixon and Cam Akers both got hurt. Todd Gurley fell off a bit, leaving you to start Antonio Gibson, who had a good season but a bad individual week, and Lynn Bowden Jr., who's listed as a running back but probably should be listed as a wide receiver. For a running back, he's only had 8 carries this season and 20 catches. Drew got 19.7 from Adam Thielen, 19.2 from J.D. McKissick, and 18.6 from Jalen Hurts. The bottom half of your lineup was the guilty party in this loss, as Robert Tonyan scored 2.2 points, Brandon Ayuk scored 3.6, Matt Prater scored 1, and the Houston defense scored a negative 1.3. You could have gotten a win by getting all of the scoring players on your bench into the starting lineup, but subbing out all 3 exactly would have been unlikely. You could have gotten Big Ben in for Jalen Hurts, Mark Andrews in for Big Bob T, and Christian Kirk in over Brandon Ayuk at the flex spot. Doing that, you would have gotten the win. Alex's Do I Say Deuce Out gains the dubious honor of being the first ever double deuce, securing the deuce for the second consecutive year, something no one has previously done. He takes the loss in the deuce game versus Jason's You're a Towel, 136 to 126. Jay was led by Josh Allen's 32.3 and Myles Gaskin's 31.4. You also got 16.2 from Jason Sanders at the kicker spot. For Alex, you got 25.1 from Aaron Rodgers, 19.4 from Jonathan Taylor, and 16.4 from the San Francisco defense. This is a pretty tough loss. You only had one player score in single digit, that being tight end Zach Ertz, who only scored you 4.8 points this week. At least you lost by 10 points. Had you benched Ertz in favor of Eric Ebron and his 13.2 points, you'd have lost by 1.5 points. That would have made the Monday night game a real sweat fest, something that Jason, Nick, and myself all enjoyed together. If you had opted to bench Aaron Rodgers in favor of Tom Brady, you would have gotten a little bit closer. Had you done it with Ertz and Brady, gotten both of them into the lineup, you would have gotten the win. If you want to go back and look at Alex's team log and pick out an individual player to blame for ending up with the second deuce in a row, I think the choice is probably Devontae Parker. You opted to start Parker for 11 games this season, getting you a total of 49 catches for 593 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not factoring in yardage bonuses, that's 101.8 points, or an average of 9.25 points per week. And if you look at his averages, he's been always between about 5 and 15 points, but never anything more. He's going to keep you in a game, but he'll not actually win a game for you. He's basically the Eli Manning of wide receivers. Jason ended up not being the deuce, so this didn't really end up being relevant, but I thought it was interesting to look at. He was wondering if this is the toughest year for the deuce in favor of points required to get a win and get out of being the deuce. And it was not. Even if you had been the deuce and lost to Alex's 125 points, with the 120-something scored last week against you to lose, it still wouldn't have been enough. That title goes to Pope 1.0, who was the deuce in 2018, thanks to Lee putting up 150 points in the deuce game. Thanks to Aaron Rodgers lighting up the Jets for 45 points on 4 touchdowns and 450 passing yards. That year, in the 2 losses he had, his opponent scored 260 points. This one, assuming it was 125 and like 123, would have been about 250 points. Just a little behind that, but close. Over here is what the final standings look like, with everyone's regular season win totals listed. This will be the nomination at the draft next year. And over here is where the money actually goes this season. For our top 3, let me know if you want me to hit you up via PayPal, Venmo, or mail you a check. For the rest of you, I'm assuming you're just going to want to roll the money over to next season. Let me know if something is different than that and you actually want to me to pay you the fraction of your cost for next year. I am planning to do a potato DFS this weekend for week 17. If you're interested in that, there'll be 2 links in the email that this video is sent to you in. One is going to be the player list of eligible picks, and the other one is going to be a link where you can basically enter your picks in, so that way I can keep track of who's entered people in and who they're picking. You have until Sunday morning to do those picks, or Saturday, or whenever the first game is. I think it's Sunday. I'd have to look to be sure. I'm pretty sure there's no Saturday games this weekend. Besides that, there's also a link for the end of the year survey with possible questions to talk about for what can we change for next year. There was about 6 or 7 things on that list, and we'll go through them here. I'm going to explain what all of them are. You should be able to put in your votes as you go through this video, listening to it, or come back and vote later, whatever you want to do. First up, as suggested by me, the trade approval time. Once 2 players agree to a trade, there's a full day of dead time for the league to veto against the trade, to vote, say, nope, this trade's not fair. In 9 years, it's never happened. Nobody ever votes against that because everybody's trusting each other to be mostly fair and take advantage of me whenever I'm trying to trade for running backs, because that's what always happens. I'd like to get rid of this delay time and just make trades happen instantly. It'll be very useful if you have a late injury and you want to try to wheel and deal on a Sunday morning rather than going to the waiver wire. Second question. Quarterback scoring. This was requested by Nick. This is a longer explanation, so we've got a lot of things to talk about here. QB scoring is very strong in this league, as it is in most leagues. Of the top 20 scoring players this season, 13 of them are quarterbacks, 7 of them are running backs, kickers, and tight ends. So the question becomes, do you want to bring the value down of all quarterbacks or just the mediocre ones? There's a few options listed below. You can choose as many as you wanted. None of them will be approved unless we get at least 7 votes for each option. And I've listed them in terms of effectiveness at bringing down scoring from the quarterback position from least effective to most effective, in my opinion. Option number 1, increase the penalty for interception from -2 to -4. It's going to hurt your quarterbacks like Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, and Tom Brady. Bring up your value of Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. It's probably not going to be a huge difference. I mean, it's a 2-point swing per pick. Right now, throwing 10 picks is going to cost you 20 points. Under this rule change, it would be 40 points. Kyler Murray threw 12 picks this year and is ranked number 3 overall. If you'd assume that he loses actually that extra 24 points because of the higher interception penalty, he'd still be at number 3 overall. It wouldn't bring him down far enough to get behind number 4, which is Aaron Rodgers. Option number 2, ditch the bonus that QBs get at 350 yards. 24 different quarterbacks got that bonus at least once this season, and it happened a total of 48 times. Most just got it a couple times, but Patrick Mahomes led all quarterbacks in getting it 5 times. That's an extra 15 points from Mahomes over someone like Kirk Cousins, who didn't hit that number at all this season. I don't know if that's really desirable because it's decreasing the bonuses for the elite QBs, which is not what you want, and then you're bringing all the mediocre QBs back into the pile. So I think that's probably opposite of what we want, but I still throw that out there as an option. Option number 3, increase the bonus to 5 points and move it to 400 yards. There were 10 400 yards games from a quarterback this year. I don't really like this option either, as it rewards teams that tend to get blown out and ended up slinging it all over the damn field. The Matt Ryans and Dak Prescotts of the world. Of those 10 times that it happened this year, I think Matt Ryan was 2 and Dak Prescott was 3. Mahomes was in there a couple times as well. I think he was 2 or 3 of them as well. Option number 4, the nuclear option. The big one, I don't know what to do about this one. In my opinion, this is the one I would go with, but I don't know if anybody else is going to be in favor of it. Nerf the points that are scored per yard for quarterbacks. Quarterbacks right now get 1 point per 25 passing yards. Running backs and wide receivers get 1 point per 10 rushing or receiving yards. The average NFL team passed for 240 yards this year, meaning the average quarterback gets almost 10 points right out of the gate just for being an average passing team. Simply because most teams only run one quarterback per game. There's a couple exclusions for that. The Saints and the whole Taysom Hill mess, whatever the hell that is. The average NFL team, on the other hand, rushes for 118 yards a game, which would be almost 12 points if it was all a single rusher. But that's not the case except for a very few scenarios. Tennessee, Minnesota, things like that. Most of the time, that's split between 2, 3, 4 guys, however it might be. In my opinion, this is why QB scoring is too high, because we have it set where it's really easy to get that high baseline for QBs, and you can't get that anywhere else. My proposal for nerfing that is to double the yardage cost to be 50 yards per points for quarterback. This is really going to increase the value of your mobile quarterbacks who can get rushing points and decrease the value of statues who just sit in the pocket and throw the ball like Phil Rivers and Tom Brady's, guys who don't move around much. Kirk Cousins right now was the 17th best scoring player in our league this season. Does that feel right? That seems really, really high to me. He scored 271.9s and threw for 3,860 yards. If you divide 3860 divided by 25 is 154 points just based off of his yardage total. If you divide that total by 50, it's 77 points. That difference is about 77 points again. It's cut in half, right? So if I knock 77 points off of Kirk Cousins' total, he's going to drop from 17 ranking to around 40 to 41. It's around the scoring of like a Josh Jacobs or a Kareem Hunt. Those two guys are the 8th and 9th best running back this season. That feels like a lot better spot for somebody like Kirk Cousins. Doing the same thing to the number 1 scoring player, which is Patrick Mahomes. He's got 388 points on 4,740 yards. So that's 195 points just on yards alone. Would drop him to 293 points. In that scenario, he'd slot in as the 5th best scoring player this season, behind Kamara, Cook, Henry, and Devontae Adams. That feels much more realistic to me. Let me know what you think on this one. It's a big, big change, but I feel like it's maybe the right way to go. All right, enough talking about quarterback scoring. Time to let me know what you think on that one. Feel free to pause the video, come back. That was a long spiel. Come back later if you need to. Next up is a suggestion by myself, mid-season pickups. We may not need to do anything with this one, but it's something that I noticed, and I thought, maybe we should do something about it. When we do our draft, we do a $200 budget at the draft. So all of the players that you draft at that time are out of, this guy costs you X dollars out of $200. When we're talking about mid-season pickups, we have a $100 fab budget. So anybody who's getting picked up and kept for potential keeper eligibility was acquired at half the cost that they would have been during the draft. So that means basically you're getting better value for and more incentive for being active during the season and less incentive for being a solid draft. Let me know what you think. Is this a concern? Should we do anything about it? So the options here is just, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. We could double the cost of the fabs or double your fab budget so you'd start at 200 instead of starting at 100. Or we could just say, if you're keeping a free agent that you picked up during the season, their cost as a keeper at the end of the year would be doubled to whatever you picked them up for. Instead of it being, I got this guy for $1, it's $2. No big deal for most of them. But your guys like, I picked up, I don't know, let's say James Robinson for, I think it's like $1. But if I picked up James Robinson for $20, he jumps to 40. There's a little bit more realistic cost if everybody's fighting over a free agency pickup that came during the season and then that person ended up working out, being a stud. There's a little bit more keeper cost to that going forward. Moving on. Sounds like the NFL is considering moving to a 17-game regular season next year. How do you want to handle it? Should we add another week to the regular season? So right now we have 13 weeks of regular season. Should we go to 14 weeks? Should the regular season stay 13 weeks long? continue to run the playoffs weeks 14 through 16, and then right now we just ignore week 17. Should we ignore week 17 and 18? So anything we decide to do here is only going to take effect if the NFL actually does add another game. If that doesn't happen next year, this would be null and void. We're going to ignore that one. The next question goes hand in hand with my last one. Ownership expansion. I've been trying to convince people this year, and I know I have a couple people convinced, that for a 16-game season, 14 teams makes a lot more sense than 12. With 14 teams, you have 13 weeks of regular season play in which everyone plays each other once, instead of, okay, we play everybody the first 11 weeks, and then we have 2 weeks where we just do catch-up or try to randomize the schedule to get matchups that haven't been playing. It's a big mess. Instead, you'd have everybody plays each other once. You'd get to week 14. You have 6 men in the championship, the top 2 still getting a bye, and 8 guys in the deuce bracket. So then the deuce no longer has a bye week for the 2 worst team. This was all well and good until this whole 17-game season come along, and now I'm not sure what the best idea is to do. Should we expand or should we leave it to be? I don't know. If we're talking about expansion, the first spot is basically Trent's to take. He's been at the draft for several years, and if he wants it, it would be his. The second spot's a bit more fuzzy. There's several people that have expressed interest if we've ever expand. Minnesota Tom, Kyle Carey, my brother-in-law. There's some people who'd be interested. I think that if we approach them that we've never talked to about, potentially Walsh, Minnesota Josh, a couple of my other friends, what are you guys thinking? How about that extra IR spot that we added for COVID this year? Should we keep it forever, regardless of COVID concerns? Or should we get rid of it after COVID gets under control? Hopefully by fall, and we don't have to worry about this for next NFL season, but it's still there. The plan was to have that extra IR spot for this year only. Should we keep it or should we get rid of it? Derek brought up the concept of wanting to make sure quarterbacks were a bit more expensive at the draft because you normally see a lot of people picking up quarterbacks for $1, $2, $3, considerably more cheaper. So he's wanting to do a QB in the flex spot, making the flex into a super flex. I've never been a huge fan of this because of how strong our quarterback has been for scoring, but it felt like, because almost everybody would always start 2 QBs in the flex. But if we hard-norfed quarterbacks with that 4th option up above, maybe it wouldn't be so overpowered. Personally, I'm thinking that in terms of this particular one, we should hold this at least a year to see what scoring looks like after we potentially nerf quarterbacks next year. Derek's second suggestion was just adding a second flex spot in general. More players starting means every player's got to have a bit more depth, just a little bit more players to be looking at, a little bit deeper rosters. That's something to consider, and I think that's it. At least for now, anyways. I hope you had a good fantasy season, despite all the crazy COVID crap. Hopefully I made the league experience a good one for you, despite you having to listen to me complaining about my team again and again and again because they're fucking terrible. We'll see you around sometime soon, maybe in another video, maybe in person, maybe not until the draft in August. Stay safe, stay healthy, and COVID-free, and we'll see you around.